Okay, some people have wanted me to talk about the general election that took part in Britain when Boris won the election. Okay, so I'm going to summarise a lot of things, okay, because I'm sure anybody who really wants to know enough can read enough in the newspapers and probably has an awareness of what was going on anyway, if you were interested. But I'm going to summarise a lot of things, okay? Now, why did Boris win and Jeremy lose? Okay, well, let's look at a few things, okay? These are some things you might not know. Firstly, image, okay? Now, originally, many years ago, Jeremy Corbyn was seen as a scruffy person who dressed very badly and almost looked like a beggar on the street, okay? Um, he didn't care about his appearance very much, and indeed liked looking fairly scruffy. I think he thought it appealed to his man of the people image he was trying to portray at the time. Okay. Next, um, as I said, Boris Johnson, to my knowledge, has never tried to look deliberately bad or scruffy, but that's another matter. Once Jeremy Corbyn became the leader of the Labour Party, he started to try and appear more presidential. He wanted to be seen virtually everywhere in a suit, or very similar, and he tried to dress very well and look much better. He wanted to appear as if he could be seen as a Prime Minister, just in terms of his appearance. Forget his policies, forget his politics, in terms of how he spoke and how he appeared. He wanted to give the impression he could be perceived as a Prime Minister, okay? And wasn't somebody who would let Britain down just in terms of his appearance. Forget his policies for now, right? So he started to go more upmarket in terms of his appearance. He started to look more conservative, more professional, and things like that. On the other hand, Boris has always tried to portray himself as a real man of the people, despite coming from a rich background. Okay? And he basically, for example, during the election campaign, I only ever saw Jeremy look in a suit or a shirt or something like that. I never saw him, in workman's clothes or anything like that. Compare that with Boris Johnson. When he went to fishmongers, he dressed in a fishmonger's uniform and handed out food or something like that. I believe I could be wrong. When he went to JCB, I believe, he dressed up in workman's clothing and wore a sort of one of these yellow vests that they have, I believe, and things like that. Okay. So Boris tried to make himself appear to be a man of the people, somebody who wasn't so stuck up they would not wear the sort of clothing and uniforms that would be worn by ordinary workers. Okay? And so he tried to appeal to as if it was appealing to the ordinary person, said, I'm on your side. I'm like you. I'm not ashamed to look like you. Okay? Whereas as I said, Jeremy now wanted to seem to be more presidential, and so I don't think he didn't want to appear in anything other than clothing that might make him look presidential. Okay. Another thing is lying. Now it's ironic here because Boris is known for lying and not being entirely honest. Okay. Sometimes, in fact, during the campaign itself, there were some issues which were identified regarding the number of nurses he was promising, and what exactly does more nurses actually mean? Does it mean more nurses 1 year compared to another year? Or does it mean that you've actually stopped some nurses leaving that would have actually left otherwise? Now, it was later revealed that more nurses he meant stopping some nurses from actually leaving and like giving them more money or something to stop them leaving. Okay? But is that really more? Most people didn't think so, but nonetheless the public sort of forgave him for some strange reason and let him get away with it. Even after he admitted this openly, he continued to tell the lie of 50,000 more nurses when he'd already admitted it would only be about 31,000. And he would just be stopping 19,000 leaving. Okay, but is that really? But anyway, but then, but the point was, okay, some people might say, well, okay, it's not entirely true, but there's some truth in it. He's done something so that there were 50,000 more nurses than there would otherwise have been if he'd taken no action. So, okay, you could argue there are 50,000 more nurses than there would have been if he hadn't stopped these people leaving, and if they, I don't know how he intends to do this, I've no idea, because you cannot make people remain a nurse in this country, you can't get guns out and threaten them or something, so I don't know how that would work, but nonetheless, okay, so let's now look at Jeremy. Now, Jeremy was caught out on some lies that weren't even in some of them. One of them isn't even really political, wasn't even relevant. One was, for example, he claimed that he used to watch the Queen's speech, which nobody really believes, because at Christmas, because he's a well-known Republican. He would like to see the abolition of the monarchy. He's campaigned for the abolition of the monarchy many years ago. I believe he still probably feels the same way, but has toned that down because he knows it. He thought it would affect his prospects, as you know. But in the past, he's made it very clear he's anti-monarchy. So I doubt very much he even bothers to watch. But let's forget my opinions for now. But he used to say he watched it in the morning, when it was actually broadcast in the afternoon, and it was well known over here when the Queen's broadcast is broadcast. If somebody watches it regularly, it's the same time every year, generally. And if you're not interested, well, you wouldn't know when it was because you don't watch it, okay? But if you did watch it, you would know, okay? So it didn't claim that he watched it on catch-up. He just said that was when he watched it, in the morning, when it was on at the afternoon, and he was picked up on it, and he said, oh, I couldn't remember what time it was on, but he didn't say I'll watch it on catch-up or anything like that, so he was seen basically as lying, okay? Another thing was, somebody pointed out to him, was he said that, he quit being a contributor to Press TV, which is an Iranian state-owned broadcaster, which was actually shown over here, okay? After there was some, I believe, some trouble in Iran over some protesters or something. And he said after that he quit. But that wasn't true, because somebody proved that he actually appeared on Press TV, after that, on at least 2 more occasions, after he said he quit and had nothing more to do with them. So, and this is where they interviewed him, and he'd been paid to be interviewed, and things like that. And it had even been declared in the members' interests. Maybe he'd forgotten, maybe he'd genuinely forgotten, but many people thought he was just basically lying. And this shocked a lot of people, because people sort of knew Boris was a liar. It didn't really surprise them. But Jeremy came across as somebody who, even if you didn't agree with him, came across as sincere and, a dedicated conviction politician, even if you didn't agree with him. Okay? And this, I think, shocked a lot of people, because they were starting to see sides of him that they didn't really see before. They thought he was a genuine, serious conviction politician that you may not necessarily agree with, and now began to realise he was more of a liar, and he wasn't quite what people thought he was. Okay? On various things. Okay? There was also the issue with him for many years criticising Israel and things like that, which were not a secret. And then the party being accused of being anti-Jewish, and Jews being made to feel unwelcome in the party because of him, and things like that. So these became issues, okay? Other issues, I think, weren't even to do with Jeremy, I think, but they directly. But I think they were indirectly, because I think it was to do with the team that he put in the front bench. In other words, the people who would take over if Boris lost. And many people thought that the people who he chose to be in his shadow cabinet. A shadow cabinet, to you, is like the alternative government, okay? It's the government that would take over, in theory, if the other party lost. Okay, so but it's like an it's an alternative government run by the opposition, which has no direct power, but is there to criticise their opponent in the government, okay, and point out where they think the government isn't doing their job properly or whatever, okay. And these were the people that would have, if people had chosen his party, would have actually taken over. And people thought that they were idiots. They thought that they came across as idiots, bimbos, whatever. I say bimbos because he tended to put a lot of women in. Possibly, I think, because they gave him a lot of physical gratification. I'm being careful how I word this, but it's what I believe. To be very honest. And they didn't seem to know much about the job or to be even interested or that competent. They came across as airheads to most people, and people thought, do we really want a bunch of idiots running the country? So I think it's also because of the people he chose, in his other team. Many of them were regularly laughed at as being clueless, even if you didn't agree with them. It wasn't so much that you didn't agree with their position or their politics, it's because they had no clue, even what they were doing. Other problems were things which you would think would be popular, but actually weren't. One of them, for example, was Jeremy was promising free broadband for everybody by 2030 or something. The idea was to basically take over all the broadband companies, and for the government to take over, and for it all to be run by the government. The view was that would then make it cheaper because they wouldn't have to pay a fat cat boss some ludicrous amount of money. They wouldn't have to spend money on marketing. Everybody would get free broadband. And he even said this, free broadband for everybody. And he thought it would be popular. But it wasn't popular with the public for various reasons. The public saw this as some sort of ploy to buy votes. They thought it was some cynical ploy to buy votes. They also thought that they also didn't like the idea of the government taking over the internet. And because they thought that this would be one step before the government then had direct access to everything that people were doing, and one step before the government started censoring everything, with nobody having the power to rebel against it. And also, many people remember the strikes in the 70s, and they thought it would only be a matter of time before people had no internet at all. Because what would happen is some government workers might say, we want a pay rise. The government would say, get lost. So the government would say, okay then, we're going to stop everybody in the country accessing the internet until you give us more money. And this sort of thing did happen with electricity companies in the 70s and various other, and I say companies in loose terms because it's actually state-owned companies, okay, right, and people didn't want that to happen again. They thought for private companies, if one internet company won't provide you with the internet, you can go to another. There's various ways of accessing the internet. There's cable, there's telephone, and there's mobile. But if all of them went on strike, because they all work for the government, then it would mean the whole country would be without the internet, and they could hold the country to ransom, and the public did not want this. They also felt that once the government got in control of the internet, suddenly there would be no more improvements to it. You wouldn't get the next generation of technology coming along, because the view is, why would the government want to spend money on giving people a better internet connection? What would be their incentive? The view of the government is usually, you've got it, be grateful you've got it at all. Whereas with private industry, there is competition, and people can go to alternative suppliers if they're not happy. Okay, but if the government was in charge of it, it would afterwards stagnate and never improve, because there would not be the political desire to improve it. Okay, and that was the perception of the public. Also, they didn't like, again, their other nationalisation programmes that they were offering, like bringing the trains and the water and the gas and electric back under government control. Because they remember what happened in the 70s when things were fairly bad in that regard. Okay, until Margaret Thatcher privatised it all in the 80s, okay? So that generally are some of the reasons. Also, some people didn't want to vote for Jeremy Corbyn and his party because Jeremy Corbyn was perceived as a pacifist. He claimed he wasn't, but he was perceived as one, and he was perceived as somebody who would not be willing to go to war if it was ever necessary. And they did not feel he could be trusted to defend Britain if it absolutely ever came to it. As all his life he'd been an anti-war protester, basically, in simple terms. Okay? And they just didn't necessarily feel that an anti-war protester, somebody who'd even protested against his own party going when they went to war, okay, being in charge of defence, they were a bit worried about it, okay. What many aren't surprised at is why he failed so badly, because, to be honest, a lot of his policies were very similar to Michael Foot's in the past, and they didn't go down very well in the past, and nobody knows why anybody would try and repeat policies which are clearly not successful. Okay? Also, a lot of people have seen countries which have communist policies, and they feel the place is a dump, and they felt that if Jeremy Corbyn's ideas were put into practice, we might end up like Venezuela or North Korea. And a lot of people did not want that. Okay? So, these are some of the problems as to which Jeremy Corbyn had and why he wasn't chosen. Why did Theresa do badly compared to Boris? Well, Theresa was introducing some policies like, reintroducing fox hunting. She wanted to bring back fox hunting, which wasn't popular in Britain with a lot of people, and some other things. And generally, Boris tried to play it very safe. He just had policies which were not controversial. We will have more police, we will have more nurses. There was nothing really controversial, and again, about any of his policies. The only policy that might be slightly controversial, which wasn't even really, was get Brexit done. He said, if you vote for me, then I will actually get Brexit done, and I will implement my deal with the EU. Now, that was the only issue. You either liked the deal that he had with the EU or you didn't, okay? But there was nothing really controversial about anything else he was offering. He was generally offering more of the same, plus more nurses and more police, essentially. He also said they would spend more on getting faster broadband, but that would be, rather than taking over the companies, it would mean, like perhaps giving some of them maybe some more money. I don't know, I don't understand it fully. But it would not mean taking them over, okay? So, as I said, Jeremy has now lost, and a new leader will be chosen sometime next year, apparently. But nobody knows who it's going to be or what direction the Labour Party intends to go. The trouble is, the Labour Party has always been traditionally the party of the poor and the working class. The problem that Labour have is most of their jobs, the jobs that used to be all about Labour in the past, were things like people working down coal mines. I'll say it again. The sort of people who used to support Labour in the past were people who generally worked down coal mines, worked in factories, on the shop floor, the ones actually operating the machinery, okay? And most of those jobs are gone now. There's not that much manufacturing anymore, which involves people doing real physical work. Most jobs these days are, working in call centres or shops or things like that. And these people might consider themselves working class, but they may not see themselves as working class in quite the same way that, perhaps a labourer might or a coal miner might, okay? And for many of them, they think, well, maybe I'll work in a shop for a few years and I might go to university and do something else. I don't know. And so today, the idea is that not many people want to be truly working class anymore. In the past, there was no way out. Nowadays, people are trying to find ways out by going to university and getting educated and then finding alternative jobs. And, they feel that the Labour Party is all about holding them down, about keeping them in a poor working class state and making them feel sorry for themselves, rather than encouraging them to do better for themselves, okay? Which the Conservative Party has been traditionally about. It's been about, why don't you own your own council house rather than just renting it from the government? Why? And we will help you to do it. Things like that. So it's the Conservative Party traditionally applauds greed, but says that you should have the opportunity to be greedy and not complain about it. And, if you're jealous of somebody else's success, you should try to be them or be like them. If you don't like the fact that a TV presenter's paid a lot of money on the television, why didn't you try and become a television presenter yourself? Why don't you train to be a TV presenter instead of complaining about somebody else being paid a lot of money to do it? Why don't you try and do it yourself? If you don't, that's generally the Conservative ethos, whereas the working class ethos is, oh my God, these TV presenters are paid so much money. Wouldn't it be better if we made them all starve on the streets? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that's the ethos, okay? And I think, as I said, the tide has been changing, and a lot of people did not want to see this country turn into North Korea, in simple terms, right? So that's why I think people didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And Boris was just offering more of the same, but with the promise that he would deliver Brexit. Okay? Also, Jeremy Corbyn said that regarding Brexit, he said that if he was chosen as Prime Minister, he would not implement Boris Johnson's deal. He would go to the EU, try and get a different deal, but this was the crux of it. He said if he got a different deal from the EU, he wouldn't even tell the public, encourage the public to vote for it. He would just say, I'm not going to tell you whether the deal is good or bad. Whatever deal I provide you with, I will just let you, the public, decide. But I will get a deal, but I won't even comment on it. And people thought, well, how can you not comment on a deal you provided? That seems wrong, right? Surely, if you've got a deal, you should be able to tell us what's good about it, what's bad about it, and if you're going to be totally independent, at least tell us the good or bad. Don't tell us you're not going to tell us about it or discuss it at all, so that you can be quite independent, in quotes, which really annoyed the public. So in the end, the public basically decided to reject Jeremy Corbyn en masse. Many areas of Britain which had never voted for the Conservative Party, who were traditionally Labour areas, for once actually switched and joined the Conservatives and backed Boris Johnson. Okay, because they felt that at least he was sticking up for the working man in trying to actually get Brexit done. Okay, but once Brexit is over and has been implemented, then many of those areas may revert to Labour just because traditionally those areas have voted Labour. But I feel even then the tide may be turning, because I think that fewer and fewer people want to associate with being working class anymore, because working class is generally seen by many as losers. Even the working class themselves see working class people as losers in many cases. They see them as people who just couldn't be bothered to try and improve themselves. And that, I think, is what is happening. Okay? So, those are my views on the general election, as I think some people asked for it and I don't think I got round to discussing it a lot. I may have done, and I may have forgotten about it, but I don't think I did. So those are my comments on the general election. Okay? Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.